Welcome back to the Leadership Project, where our vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. Today, we are joined by Dr. Vahe Ohanessian, who is the founder of the theory of Self Relativity. We pride ourselves on finding people that are going to give you thought-provoking content that do allow you to challenge your thinking. And we're certain that this interview is going to be no exception to that. So please sit back and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Leadership Project, where we inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. In today's episode, we're greatly honored to be joined by Dr. Vahe Ohanessian, who is the founder of a theory called the theory of Self Relativity. We pride ourselves on this show on finding some people that are doing exactly that, challenging the status quo, that are developing thought-provoking works so that we can hear from them and decide how that might be applicable in a leadership context. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Dr. Vahe and I have met previously. We had a wonderful conversation. I actually sometimes feel like I wish I had recorded that. It was such a great conversation. So I'm really excited about today's conversation and what it could mean for you, our dear audience. So Dr. Vahe, please say hello to the audience and we'll make a start.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Mick, for such a wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and share my thoughts with you. Excellent.
So a little bit further on Dr. Vahe, so he is the author or the founder of this movement called the theory of Self Relativity, with a bunch of work that goes in behind that we're going to go through today. A book that is in production soon, and you'll be able to pre-order copies of that book, and really thought-provoking blog posts that he's been doing in preparation for this. He's also a dentist and the founder of a movement called the Bad Breath Institute. Today, though, we're going to dive deep into the theory of self-relativity. So before we go any further, Dr. Vahe, can you please introduce yourself a little bit to the audience and share with us what led you to be with us here today?
So I'm Vahe Ohanessian by profession and education. I'm a dentist. However, I have a quite diverse background in many other things, including a real estate broker and quite a lot of interest in other business and entrepreneurship and startups. So I understand very much about the necessities and the requirements of entrepreneurship as well as leadership that goes along with entrepreneurship. In terms of the dentistry part of it, a while back, I got out of regular dentistry in order to implement what I created, which is a new system for treating bad breath, and which is one of the number one concerns when it comes to social interactions, including dating. It's a very interesting thing, and we've been doing clinical proof of market, and we've been very successful. So we're moving forward with that, and hopefully we can launch it all over the world. Having said that, when it comes to personal development, I've always been very aware and cognizant type of an individual all my life. And about 5-6 years ago, I've always been basically in a position of advisory and leadership. So people always came to me with different questions and guidance that they needed, and I was doing well. However, about 5-6 years ago, there were certain situations in my life where they allowed me to look back at my life and see some of the good that I did and maybe some of the mistakes that I made. And the interesting thing was that no matter which way I looked, there was one common factor that I saw in all of them, and that was the self. So I began to bring the focus onto the self and begin to understand much deeper as to what the self is, where we stand, how we relate to everything else. And of course, the relativity of our existence and our self became very apparent to everything and everyone else that we live with during our lifetime. So that took a central focus. And then I did over 10,000 hours of research just to ensure that my thoughts were based on reality and science, and that they were not just feel-good thoughts. And from then on, this whole movement was created. Theory of Self Relativity is the book, which I call it the user's manual for the mind, because it addresses everything that our mind goes through, and it shows how to apply a particular thinking system, which is called factual thinking. And system of self-relativity includes the book, as well as there will be courses that I will be offering for a one-day certification courses so that artists can become life coaches themselves and be able to pass on what they learn in the book. The book, it's a very involved book, and the print version could be between 600 to 800 pages. Now, of course, it's a very long book, but the book is not necessarily to be read continuously, but it can be used as reference to whatever is in the mind of a person who has been exposed to the system. They can always go back with indexing and find out the things that apply to them.
Thank you, Dr. Vahe, and I'm looking forward to going a little bit deeper into some of the concepts. And what drew my attention to you were some of the quotes that you post on your website and also on LinkedIn. They are thought-provoking, and I'm really looking forward to getting into some of those. I want to step backwards firstly, and what changed in your life? I understand that maybe there was an event in 2017 where you had a bit of a life-changing moment that really made you stop and think, that led to the theory of self-relativity.
The backdrop was always there. However, both personal and business matters came together about 5-6 years ago, where for the first time I was going through a divorce, and that enabled me to deal with the personal matters in such a ways where I wasn't dealing with them before, and also in business where changes were needed, and it was the satisfaction of life that I wanted to get from business, where I was able to make the pivot and the direction that I need to take in order to move forward. So those all came together about 5-6 years ago and led to the writing and the introduction of this system.
I want to delve a little bit into some of the quotes that you put out there in LinkedIn, and some of them can be a little bit controversial, and it seems like you have a view about some of the performance coaches in the world, some of the coaches that are out there that are really motivational, etc. So I'm going to throw some of them at you, and we'll see where the conversation goes. So one of the ones I read recently: motivation alone will not get you any results. Tell us about what led you to say that.
Well, motivation is something that we do in order to be able to initiate ourselves into an action, or sometimes inaction. However, we need the motivation which enables us to make a decision to move forward. Basically, the way that our thought processes work is that we have a thought, we create a feeling, the feeling allows us to make a decision, and the decision leads us to an action. The problem that I've realized that most people go through, and it's mostly subconscious, including myself, I did it, is that we are very, very aware of our feelings. And the reason for our feelings being so central is because our feelings enable us to take an action. And our feelings, in a primitive and instinctive sense, are supposed to be protective. So we learn to react to our feelings quickly in order to stay safe. As primitive human beings, many millennia ago, what I've done is basically in the book, and this will probably be a better way of describing it. In the book, I've metaphorically divided our mind into two components: the primitive mind and the intelligent mind. And the primitive mind is, I call that the default system, because the primitive mind doesn't care if we're happy or if we're successful or anything. All the primitive mind cares is if we're safe. And the things that it looks for is for us to find food, for us to not become food, for us to have safety of shelter, and for us to be able to find a mate to pass our genes on to the next generation. That's all it cares about. And anything that could jeopardize that, it's going to act negatively. So our feelings guide us to be able to protect ourselves. That's why we have 90% of our feelings are negative emotions and only 10% are positives. Having said that, motivation comes in, which is very, very closely related to feelings. So when we want to make a change sometimes takes work to do. and I can get into the details of it. However, when we motivate ourselves, but we don't follow through with the necessary changes that we need to make, well, all we do is we just make ourselves feel good. We have a difficulty today, for example, about something, and we say, "Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna go and do this thing and change my life around." And at that moment, when we give ourselves that motivation and shot in the arm, basically what we're doing is called placebo thinking. That's what I've termed it as, where we create thoughts in order to support our feelings. We just want to feel good at that moment, so we give ourselves a shot in the arm. But most of the time, we don't follow through. And unfortunately, a lot of motivational systems that are out there, they actually take advantage of that need that we have in order to feel good immediately. Hence the reason why in the book and on the website, I say we often do things and we think things in order to feel good, not because they're good for us.
Yeah, I did see that. And I also noted on your website the very introductory statements, which I think was quite good to be so open about it. You say something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing here, if you're looking here for someone to pat you on the back and tell you everything's great and to motivate you and to send you out there, then you should look elsewhere. This is going to be a much deeper analysis. I'm paraphrasing, Dr. Vahe, but essentially you're saying that it needs to be deeper than that. It needs to be more than just uplifting pats on the back to actually get someone into action, is what I took away from that. Is that a fair reflection?
Correct. As I say, if you're looking for pep talk, you shouldn't be over here. You should be somewhere else.
Yeah,
and that's what most motivational systems actually promote. The reason why a lot of some of the things that are wrong with other motivational and personal development systems is that they're a one-man show. And this is no offense to anyone else. These are based on my observations. They're a one-man show. They do not have a technique where you can become aware of it, understand it, and apply it continuously to all aspects of life. And what they do is that most of these other motivational teachings, they capitalize on two things. One is ambiguity. Because we've had difficulty with personal development, we think it's such a difficult thing and it's so ambiguous. And when it's ambiguous, ambiguity creates control. So we become submissive to the person that's creating the ambiguity. And the second thing is that they access us through our feelings. The same thing that we do to ourselves in order to make ourselves feel good, they do it at a much bigger scale. They either give some quotes that kind of blow things out of proportion, or they give us some chest pounding actions and statements and all that in order to just get us going. And then a week later, when we go back and we have a real issue that we want to apply it to, we just go back and say, well, what is it that I learned? It really felt good, but I didn't learn anything. And that's where the difference comes in. We don't want to give that pep talk. We want people to understand that. Once you understand it, and once you become aware, you understand it, then you can implement the actions about it. So the most important things are awareness and understanding. Now, motivation is very important. It's one of the first steps, but motivation alone won't get you anywhere. Motivation is very similar to mindfulness. You can become mindful. You can find out what your thoughts are, but if you don't do anything about it, it's not going to go anywhere. So they have to be followed by an action type of a second step. Motivation has to be followed by an action that's going to make the change. And mindfulness has to be followed by what I call thoughtfulness, which is understanding those thoughts that you discovered what they are and how to deal with them.
Yeah, you're touching on mindfulness there already. I'd like to come back to that. We've also gone deeper than I expected early on, but that's okay too. And we are talking about feelings. And one of your other famous kind of quotes that I've read is, I think, therefore I feel, therefore I am. Can you explore that a little bit for us? And what did you mean when you said that?
Correct. That follows along with the other line that to feel good, you must think well. Those go hand in hand together. So most people are very much in touch with their feelings, and because self relativity is a very large scale and involved type of a system. Some people, when they hear me continuously talk about gaining control over thoughts and becoming a factual thinker, which is that our thoughts should be based on facts, not based on our feelings. Some people have turned around and say, well, you want me to become like a robot. And that's not the case. When you actually, since you're feeling, so the way that perhaps I'll get into it a little bit deeper, the way that I describe feelings is that we have two kinds of feelings. And that's the way that I've described it in the book. We have tangible feelings and we have intangible feelings. And let me give you this example to you. Tangible feelings, for example, here I am as a dentist. What is a toothache? That's a toothache is a feeling that we have, which is a negative feeling. Nature has programmed us to feel pain when there's something wrong with our tooth, not feel a tickle, so that we can do something about it in order to alleviate the cause. In the primitive times, toothache and tooth infection wasn't the number one reason why most people didn't live past 30 years of age. So when nature wants us to take care of something, it makes us feel negative. So when we feel that toothache, that pain, that is a symptom. We use that pain as a symptom to go and find out what underlying cause it has. And if it's a toothache, it's a tooth. And what do? We don't cover it up. We don't just keep on taking pain medications. We don't just keep on rubbing it and talk ourselves into thinking that it's going to go away. So basically, we don't BS ourselves with our thoughts or give ourselves shots in the arm. We actually get up and go to the dentist, and they either pull the tooth or fix the tooth. And guess what? When the cause is alleviated, what happens to the feeling? The feeling is gone. It either resolves or it gets eliminated. You can't eliminate a feeling by itself by pushing it down. You got to fix the cause in order to let the feeling by itself adjust to the cause. Feelings are not standalone. Feelings cannot stand by themselves. Feelings are completely related to their underlying causes. And by giving this tangible example, well, now we can go to the intangible. By the way, when it comes to tangible, your toothache could be caused by your tooth. Your headache could be caused by your high blood pressure, or you could be caused by you banging your head somewhere. There are different reasons. However, when it comes to your intangible feelings, which are basically your emotions, there's always one underlying cause, and that cause is a thought. So every time you feel something, you use your feeling. That's what my cognitive cognition technique is, where you use your feelings to identify their underlying causes. Because feelings, just as in the case of that tooth, are a symptom of an underlying cause. And in the case of intangible or emotional feelings, they're always a thought. So you go back and look at that thought to see what it is. Now, going back to that quote that you had, and in response to some people saying, well, you want us to just think and be like robots, that's not the case. When you begin to understand what your feelings are caused by, you will recognize that about 80 to 90% of your thoughts that you have that are making you feel certain ways are actually not factual and they're wrong. And once you begin to resolve or eliminate those thoughts, guess what? Those feelings disappear. So the thoughts that you're left with, which produce certain kind of feelings, your feelings become pure and more focused and more genuine. That's why you can't just, as much as I am for factual thinking, I also am very much for our feelings. That's why I think, therefore I am is too robotic for me. I think, therefore I feel, therefore I am, which is the right process. And that's why it goes back to the other line, which is to feel good, you must think well. Because if you're going to basically lie to yourself just to create feelings that are going to make you feel good at that moment, well, then you're not going to feel good, because the next day your real problems are there and your feelings are going to come back. Therefore, you have to think good in order to be able to have good feelings.
There's so many things to unpack there, and I'm not even sure which sequence to do. So bear with me. I'm going to take us on a bit of a journey here, Dr. Vahe, and see where this takes us. So one of the things that I'm hearing about the feeling and the thought, and one of the things that I see a lot in the world, is where people make assumptions about what someone else's perception is of them. And then that thought then turns into some level of negativity, some level of anxiety, some level of stress. And if you don't go and challenge those assumptions to see if they're factual, then those thoughts will remain, and that can turn into a spiral. And I even feel like it's even more prevalent in a digital world, where someone might get a SMS message from someone and they start second guessing what the person intended without testing that, without testing whether the thought that they're having is a factual thought or whether it's their own extrapolation of what the other person actually meant by that. And that can spiral itself into a lot of negativity and a lot of anxiety. What are your thoughts on that?
Correct. And we don't have to necessarily wait for someone else to do that. We do that a lot to ourselves. So whether the source is someone else or ourselves, it's always the same thing. That's why we have to become very aware of and understand our own thoughts. And the only way that we can be sure that our thoughts are proper, which neither our feelings or our insecurities nor other people's comments will affect us, is to make sure that, what we are feeling is based on a factual thought. And what I mean by a factual thought is that any thought that you have to be able to openly evaluate that thought to see if there's real facts and evidence behind it, or if it's just an opinion, an idea, a belief that is not proven with fact. When you know that there's facts backing your thoughts, then you automatically begin to create self-confidence. And when you have self-confidence, you're able to immediately unpack other people's statements or your own thoughts to see what the value of those thoughts are. And the reason why facts are so important is because there's only one fact per every situation. Facts are not open to interpretation. And if they're not open to interpretation, therefore facts are not open to manipulation. Neither you can manipulate yourself nor others.
So I want to go deeper on that. And here I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. The more and more we get into the psychology of buying behavior, if we use that as an example, the more we discover the psychology of buying behavior. So what leads someone to make a choice, to make a purchase or not make a purchase? And when they make that purchase, who are they going to buy from? What product are they going to buy? Which brand or which person are they going to make that purchase from? The more and more we delve into that, the more we realize that people make emotional decisions that they then rationalize, as opposed to making a rational decision from the outset. What's your reflection on that in terms of the balance there between the emotion and the fact?
Correct. And that's exactly what it is. That's what I call placebo thinking. We create thoughts, we concoct and create thoughts in order to support our desired feelings, instead of creating feelings based on what the real thoughts are supposed to be. And that's why, for example, you use buying something. Well, then let's talk about shopaholism, which is one form of addiction. And that's what addiction is. Addiction is basically based on placebo thinking. We justify and rationalize ourselves that, okay, one more time we'll do this in order, and then we won't do it, or I need to do this because of that. And let's say, someone who buys 10 purses or 5 shoes at any given time, and they justify, well, the color of this is just a little different than the other one. And if I wear it with the other clothing that I have hanging in my closet for the past 10 years with the tags on that I haven't even touched, but I know it's there, then that will be good if I buy it. And what that does is that those type of thoughts that we create, it basically distracts ourselves externally with other things, which goes back to the other word that I've created, which is called externalization. We do that in order to preoccupy our minds with external things in order to avoid seeing our own weaknesses. That's why no matter how much of that we do, we still go back to the same behavior and same uncomfortable feeling that we've had, because we're externally focusing instead of changing things internally with our thoughts.
Okay, I want to bounce off that now, because now I think we've circled back to something that we almost went to a little while ago, which was about that pleasure cycle and wanting to feel good and doing things to feel good. And there's some work. I'll need to put a link to this in the show notes, I think, from Salisbury, and I'll need to check my notes on this one. But in terms of the levels of true happiness and sustainable happiness in the world, if you start with the pleasure life, and the pleasure life is what you're talking about, and the addiction is part of this. A pleasure life is when you get that short-term pleasure, but it has a very short half-life. And it has a half-life that gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And if all you do is seek pleasure and seek to feel good all the time, it's this spiral, a compounding spiral, where you'll want to keep on going and searching that pleasure and searching to feel good. And the example of what you said there about the shopaholic, they're exactly doing that. They're seeking pleasure, but then they'll need to seek it again the next day and the next day and the next day. And it may just need to compound all the time. Your reflections on that?
Well, that's a very involved component, which manifests itself in many, many different ways in our lives. Hence the reason why, even on the website, it gets just one link to that one page, which is called happiness. So we're always battling between negativity and positivity. And as I stated at the beginning, we have 90% of our feelings and emotions and things that we deal with are negative, and only 10% are positive. And our positives are generally attached to some kind of an action as a reward, but our negativities are as a default. That's why I state, and I'll use the happiness, and then we can use we can parallel that with any other positive feeling that we want to reflect to. We continuously try to experience happiness. We think there's such a thing as euphoria. And when I explain that that's not the case, I get a lot of setback because it hurts a lot of people's feelings, because they want to believe that ultimately they'll get to that happiness stage, which they will be euphoric and ecstatic for the rest of their life. And nature just does not work that way. Anything positive, happiness, or any such desired outcome is secondary to negativity. And when I try to explain that, I get many people becoming defensive because it truly violates their desired feelings. But that's how nature operates. That's why the whole system, the book, it's not just based on just imaginations. It's based on science. And that's where I dive deep into physics. This book is written based on 3 principles that I call them principles of psychophilosophy, which is psychology, physics, and philosophy. I actually have gone in detailed physics, showing how we as material objects made of atoms relate to the rest of the universe made of atoms. And most people don't find that very comforting, that realizing that we're pretty much have similarities to a rock on Mars or some other things that are made of atoms, which is everything basically. So having said that, there's what's called the law of entropy, or the second law of thermodynamics in physics, which says that the degree of disorder in the universe is continuously increasing, or in a system. But in this case, we'll say disorder. And there are many examples to it. So basically, if left alone, there are more ways for things to go wrong than for them to go right. So a lot more things will turn negative if left alone than if positive. And if you want them to become positive, that's favorable for us, then we have to actually put in energy, action to do it. And I give an example of a building. If you want to build a building, it might take you 2-3 years to build the building. And then once you build it, so you have to put a lot of effort and energy and expense and time into it to build a building. And once you build a building, you have to continuously put effort and energy into it in order to maintain it. If you don't, the minute you leave it alone, it will start deteriorating and ultimately it will fall apart. So that's why it's easy to destroy, but it's difficult to make. It's the same thing with our feelings. If we want to feel positive, or if we want to feel good, or if we want to accomplish something in a positive way, we can't just decide to do that. We have to first go ahead and address and resolve the negativities that are not allowing us to reach the positivity. Once we've relieved or eliminated the negativities, then we can approach to get to the positivities. As stated, happiness is only a state of experience. However, negativity or sadness or any other negative emotions, they are actually a default state of existence. So negativity is a state of existence. Happiness is a state of experience. And you can replace happiness with positivity or any of that. So in order for us to be able to experience the good, we have to first resolve and eliminate the negativity. And if we have to first resolve and eliminate something that's negative, in order for us to be able to experience something positive, we have to be able to face the negativity, become aware of it, understand it, take action, resolve it, eliminate it, and then get to the positivity. If not, as I've given more example in the book, it's just like covering up body odor with perfume. You don't take a shower and you put perfume on your body, the underlying smell is going to come out. In order for you to smell good, you have to first take a shower and wash your body. And you can't just wash your body once. You have to continuously do it. And the smell of the perfume will go away after a while, but the bad smell of the body getting dirty and will come up. That's nature. And once you understand it, and you understand that there's nothing wrong with you by you feeling negative, the understanding, as I say in the book, is that if you feel negative more often than you feel positive, and if your negativities last longer than your positivities do, you're simply a normal human being.
I want to work through that. That's potentially a breakthrough moment right there, Dr. Vahe, because I'm sitting here listening to everything that you're saying, very much oversharing here. I've been studying this a lot recently myself. So bear with me as I go through my own mental process here, and I'd love to hear your comment on this at the end of that. So the historical use of psychology, often it was started off as around things like peak performance and wanting to achieve high levels of achievement in sports and other areas. It then turned into more therapeutic area where it was therapy and dealing with what was wrong with people. So it became a diagnosis tool, the early days of psychology, psychologists, and the very realm of that domain became about diagnosing problems with people, trying to work out what was wrong with them and bring them to a normal. Then the more modern psychology is what we call positive psychology, where you're actually looking to work on the strengths of people, to amplify those strengths and to achieve greater levels of achievement. What I'm hearing from you, though, if I take that step back to that middle step of that era of psychology where people were getting diagnosed with what was wrong with them and trying to find solutions to what was wrong with them, what you're saying is those feelings of negativity are just normal. They're human. It's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's how your brain is wired. It's how you are wired. And it's how you manage those feelings of negativity that are important. Is that what I'm hearing?
First of all, in terms of the references that you made to different psychologies, I don't box myself in by saying maybe the old ways or the new ways. And that's why I say whether we improve, if we want to improve in our lives, we must remain unbiased and adaptable. That means that, and hence the reason why I never subscribe to any ideology, because ideologies are limited. So you have to stay open to be able to just use everything from everywhere possible to pick and choose the best that's possible. However, in terms of negativity, we'll go back to what we discussed a little bit earlier. We feel negative because negativity is a protective mechanism. But nature has programmed us to be on the lookout for the negative. And if we don't have the primitive dangers, as I call it in the book, of the lion attacking us, of us becoming food, we have other things that we begin to worry about. Am I going to make the rent? Am I going to have enough money for this? Am I going to find a mate? So all these different things begin to come up in our minds. And although they're not as detrimental as being eaten by a lion, because we don't have anything more negative than those things that we're thinking, our primitive mind automatically elevates those to the same negativity level as the lion attacking us. So once we understand that certain things are not as bad, then we'll be able to deal with them and resolve them. So that's why in my system, I say, you only need coaching so much. You only need a therapist so much. You should become your own best coach and your own best therapist. Because every time that you see something, once you identify the cause of it, you will be able to move forward with making the changes. However, even my system, and this is where I'll introduce this, even in my system, there's two conditions that I call them non-negotiables. If you can't do it or if you don't have it, even my system is not going to help you, which my system is directed to you helping yourself. One is the desire. You have to have the desire to want to make changes, to want to get away from the negativity and to improve your life. If you're one of those, let's say, narcissistic types or whatever, there's nothing wrong with me, I don't need to make changes. Okay, well, then I can't help you. And then the other one, which is even more painful, but they go hand in hand, it's called introspection. Introspection is basically self-inspection, where you turn the cameras, your observation cameras that are generally directed outwards towards other things and other people, you turn those around to your own self and you go deep inside yourself in order to identify your personal deficiencies and self-weaknesses that you have. Because it is those weaknesses that are the negativities that are holding you back. Once you identify them, then you can become aware of them, understand them, diagnose them, and treat them and make them stronger. But for many people, it's very difficult to do that. It's very painful to look inside yourself and say, I have all these deficiencies. I'm sorry, but I'm fat, or I'm not educated enough, or I have drug addiction, or there's just so many negative things that we can have. And in order for us to face those, we not only have to face them, but we also deep down inside, non-consciously know that it's going to require a lot of change and work to address those things. And we just don't want to do that. So hence the reason why we keep covering those things up, and we keep doing other things by preoccupying our mind externally, as I call, again, externalization, whether it's buying things or whether it's gambling or drugs or sleeping around, or it could be anything that preoccupies our mind from not seeing our internal weaknesses.
So listeners to the podcast will know that I do practice self-reflection every day. It's something that I do. I do believe that I am quite self-aware of where my shortcomings are. I am motivated to address those shortcomings, but I'm going to come back to something you said earlier in the podcast, which was if I don't act on them, still nothing happens, right? So self-awareness is a great step, and it's a very important step. Being motivated to change is also important. But if I don't put anything into action, I'm still not any better off. I guess that's the summary of what you're saying in a few of the things that we've said so far today.
Well, again, just to make it easy, it's thoughts, behavior, action. I mean, thoughts, feelings, behavior. And behavior is either action or inaction. A lot of times we might feel something really stressful or uncomfortable, and because we're feeling it without addressing the underlying thought, we actually impulsively want to take an action. A lot of times, inaction is probably more difficult and more important than an action that could cause more damage. So when I'm saying that we have to take an action, is that we have to move ourselves to that behavior level. But if the thoughts are not based on facts, if the thoughts are not factual, well, once we recognize them, and I do not mean resolving or eliminating thoughts, which will be about 80 to 90% of the thoughts that we carry. Resolving or eliminating thoughts is not pushing it under a rug. It's understanding these thoughts and saying, you know what, these thoughts are not applicable to my real life. I'm not going to deal with them. Once you don't deal with them, you eliminate them. Or if there's a small thing, you resolve it, and the underlying feeling adjusts itself. Once you eliminate a thought, well, there's no action needed. But you have to be able to identify which are the ones that you need to eliminate and which are the ones that you need to take on and go ahead and take an action in order to correct them.
I do like what you're saying there about testing your thoughts and understanding what is just a perception versus what is a fact. And this is something I think a lot of us can learn a lot from. So thank you, Dr. Vahe. I like that. I'm going to throw something at you now, and I do want to challenge you on this one as well, to be clear. And I'm loving this conversation because we can really bounce things off each other here. When I was reading your work, you talk about a most important word, and that most important word being self. And then I see the most dangerous word, and the most dangerous word is others. Let's start with that. What do you mean by the most important word is self, the most dangerous word is others?
So I've put together what I call the self equation. And the self equation is you on one side equals other people and other things. And other things could be anything that's non-people, including the universe. So basically, it's a balancing act between yourself. The self equation is in its most optimum level, where it's an equilibrium between yourself and the other side, where the two sides are equal together. However, because of many different reasons, from our insecurities to our neediness to societal, cultural, traditional, religious teachings, we have a tendency of focusing too much on others. And the others can be either we want to buy more things, we want to have more material things, we want to have more zeros in our accounts, we want to have flashier cars or whatever it is, just so that we can create a stronger self-identity externally, which is completely not correct. Or we focus mostly on other people because we want to be nice to other people, we want to care for other people, we want to do more for other people in order to impress them and have them like us or love us or whatever it is, without us taking care of ourselves. That's why others can be very dangerous. When you become a people pleaser, or when society teaches you that you have to be altruistic continuously, or where you have to turn the other cheek, or where you have to just, where your focus is other people, again, you're not capable of turning those observation cameras to introspection. All you're doing is you're doing extrospection, which is evaluating the outside, and you're trying to gain self-identity from outside. Your self-identity should come from inside. That's why it is called self relativity, because everything is relative to yourself, other things and other people. That's why one of the commandments in the book, I have the 10 enemies of self-improvement and the 10 commandments. And one of the commandments says centered self-life, which means that living a centered self-life from the inside out. Centered self is not the same as self-centered or selfish. They both prioritize the self. But centered self doesn't do it at the expense of others and not caring for others. Centered self does by prioritizing the self first and then relating everything else to the self. And I give the example of an airplane going down. If an airplane in an emergency, they always say, put your mask on first before you secure it on your child. As much as you want to save your child, if you secure the child and you pass out, that child's not going to know how to take care of itself. So you have to be strong. You have to be self-sufficient. You have to be able to take care of yourself. You have to be good on your own before you can do good to other people.
I'd like to build on that and just say, well, when you put that oxygen mask on first, not only can you save your child and be there for your child, but you might be able to save 10 other people because you've looked after yourself. So that makes sense. And I'm glad that you clarified that, because when I was reading that, and I mentioned that I was going to challenge you on it, and I'm not now, I'm going to build on it rather than challenge on, you do need to look after yourself so that you are in a position where you can be there for other people and to have a greater impact on the world, even if it's an altruistic impact. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. So absolutely. And I do see a lot of people in the world that do put other people first at their own detriment. Or it could be the seeking of other goals, externalization or externalization, as you've referred to it in your theory of self-relativity, that becomes all-encompassing. How do other people perceive me? Not how do I perceive me, but how do other people perceive me? I should clarify where I was going to challenge you, but now I won't, because your explanation was wonderful. One of the greatest things that I get in terms of happiness is that ability to help other people. But I do work on myself first. So I do self-reflect. I work on my own weaknesses. I work on my strengths to build those up. But one of the greatest pleasures that I do get is in helping other people to achieve less stressful lives. And that philanthropic level of happiness is long-lasting. So I mentioned before about the pleasure life. When you chase pleasure, you always have to chase pleasure. And that's where addiction can come in, et cetera, et cetera. What I find, and this could be a completely personal reflection, but what I find is when I do things for others, after I've looked after myself, when I do things for others, that pleasure lasts forever. Any reflection on that?
Well, when you do things for others, it will only last if you didn't have to sacrifice something from your side to do it for others. If you did it as an additive to your existence, yes. But if it's as a replacement to your well-being, then no, it won't be, and it will go away. And that's a form of people-pleasing, codependency, or, as I say in one of my one-liners, is that selflessness and self-sacrifice is not righteous. It's self-abuse. And unfortunately, through culture, society, tradition, religion, we are taught to be selfless. But the whole word itself, selfless, that is that you have a less of a self. It means that you have to sacrifice yourself for other people. And there should be no sacrificing. In living life, there should be no sacrifice. It should be only building on one another. Hence the reason why for another one of the commandments in my book, which is complementary, not completing. Any kind of an interaction that you have or a relationship that you have should be complementary. It should not be completing. One shouldn't complete the other, or one shouldn't sacrifice for the other. If any interaction or relationship, the worst that an interaction or a relationship should be, which means including doing things for other people, the worst that it should be is sometimes temporarily be neutral. It should not be deductive. If it is deductive, it's not the right interaction. Interactions and relationships should be neutral at worst, but additive at best.
I like that word, additive. I also liked the clarifications that you made around being centered self is not the same as being selfish. I think that's really important. And I also like what you're saying about balance. if I think about relationship breakdowns, whether they be personal relationships or business relationships or working relationships, imbalance would have to be one of the greatest reasons why a relationship would break down, where there has become a very one-sided element where give and take is no longer in balance, as an example. And everyone hears these statements before you need to be able to love yourself before you love someone else truly, right? And I think I'm liking what I'm hearing from you, Dr.
But do you really know what loving yourself is?
I do.
And when I say "do you," I'm not saying telling you. But when people say, "Does one know what loving themselves is?"
That's a great question for our audience to self-reflect on. I think it's something that I you could probably tell a pause when I said I do, because I think I do, but it's something that you have to always work on. It's not something that you achieve one day and all of a sudden that's it. It's done. It's something that you need to continually work on yourself, and that's why I do things like the self-reflection every day.
And that's why I have the very powerful statement that you can say life or whatever it is, but I say improvement is not an event. It's a lifetime process. We want to look at things as an event in our life, but nothing is an event. There's only one, if you look at it factually, there's only one event in our life, and that's our death. Anything in between are just sequence of events, continuum of events, which are stepping stones in the process of life. Whether it's good event or bad event, whether it's success or failure, whatever you categorize it, time continues and we have to move on with time that moves forward. That's what physics is. It's time. And we have to be parallel with the time. We can't stay back. When we mentally categorize a failure as a final event, or even success as a final event, then we can't move past that because we put an end to it. That's actually not supposed to be. It should be viewed as an event in the continuum of the process. And once you do that, whether you fail or you succeed, whether you get heartbroken or you're happy, you continue moving forward. When you make money, you don't stop making. So when you're happy, you shouldn't stop being happy. And when you're sad, you shouldn't stop being sad. You shouldn't just stay sad. So you just continue on improving.
Yeah, I love that statement that you made. That was one of the ones that I read as well. It's certainly not an overnight event. Change is never an overnight event. It's a process, and sustainable
change. But we all want to look at it as an event, because when we see someone go public in a public company, we just see that event. We don't see all the different events that led to that process. And just by going public, they don't stop there and say, okay, I'm done. They still continue.
You can have pivotal moments in your life. You can have trigger events, but it's never a once-off. It's never an overnight. Overnight successes take 20 years to come, and changes in your mindset, etc., also take time. That's really good, Dr. Vahe.
Well, the universe changes all the time. Therefore, we have to change all the time. That's entropy, because nothing stays stagnant. Everything changes towards disorder. So we not only have to change, but we have to actually slow down negative change in order to be able to locally, in our lifetime, be able to make positive change. Now, all the positive changes that we're making, for example, all the technological improvements that we've done, all the advancements that we've had in medicine and all that, guess what? In a few 100 million years or a few billion years, when the sun goes out, when the sun becomes a red giant, the Earth's going to get engulfed, and our civilization will probably end. So all of those changes that we've made will succumb to the disorder of the universe. However, during our lifetime or during our civilization's time, we can actually slow down entropy. We can slow down disorder by putting in active energy and effort in there in order to be able to make our to make our temporary locality work. And I'm not using locality as some of these mental gurus try to use by using ambiguity. I'll stay away from mentioning names. I'm using that as literally a mechanism of being able to cheat nature temporarily while we're alive.
Okay, I'd like to circle now to our audience. Now, the audience of this podcast, it is the Leadership Project. And therefore, the people that listen to our podcast are looking to challenge the status quo of leadership, to improve their leadership and sharpen the saw. So what I'd like to reflect on now, Dr. Vahe, is how we can use this in a leadership context. And I've got some specific questions to get us started. Simon Sinek is very famous for saying that leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in our charge. So what I'd like to reflect on now is, in this thought about self-relativity, what takeaway can a leader take about applying your learnings in a leadership context and in taking care of their team?
If you want to be a good leader, you have to first know how to lead your own life. If you don't know how to take care of yourself and lead your own life, you won't know how to do it to others. And a lot of these leadership things, including some of the comments from Simon Sinek, and these are respectfully my opinions, are too focused on the external, and they become too ideological. When they become too ideological, then it destroys any kind of a openness that there could be in order to have proper leadership. And case in point for that is that many of these, just as the mentorship and self-improvement teachings try to reach out for the person's feelings, and they make them feel good rather than showing them what the right things are, because that creates a big following and it helps maybe business. It's the same thing when it comes to the leadership teaching. When leadership programs are taught that it's not about the leader, but it's about everyone else, where quantity-wise you have more followers than you have leaders in any organization. So when you collectively begin to get more followers, that's good for the business of the person who's teaching it, but it might not be correct for the business. When somebody's a follower, it doesn't mean that they have to follow for the rest of their life. Every person should be a follower and a leader at the same time, because when you follow, you learn. When you lead, you teach. So, and that goes hand in hand. That's why I have very different kinds of statements when it comes to leadership. First, the way that I describe leadership is that true leadership is I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a mental block. True leadership is guidance and inclusion. So when you're being a leader, you don't have to sacrifice yourself. You don't have to focus on others or on yourself. When you're a true leader, you include people in what you're doing and you guide them. That by itself already proves that you are basically leading other people and you're teaching them how to do things on their own so that then they can lead others. As I say, you weren't born knowing, you learn from others, continue learning while teaching others. So these are the way that you got to look at leadership. You can't just say that true leaders are the ones that only focus on followers. No, if you're continuously going to worry about if your followers are going to like you or if your employees are going to like you, then you're not going to be able to focus on the forward look of the business that you need to. You have to do what you need to do. And then you have to also bring in other people into it so that they can contribute to it. And then they can lead other people. It's that symbiotic relationship that works. In any other way, if you do that, if you don't guide and include, anything else becomes just simply an ideology. And I'm very anti-ideology.
So thank you, Dr. Vahe. Some really key takeaways that I take from that are that for a leader to truly be effective and to be able to take care of one's team, you first must take care of oneself, that other people will be looking to you as well and looking to learn from you. And you, by embodying this concept of self-relativity, you'll also be able to coach people and teach people on how to also look after themselves as well, which then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy is what I'm hearing from that. And then to truly lead, sometimes you do need to challenge the status quo, as we always talk about here on the podcast, and you do need to lead the way. You do need to be different. You do need to challenge and not just look externally all the time. Other takeaways that I took from that. Anything that you think I missed there?
You mentioned the word challenging status quo a few times. Nothing is done to challenge the status quo. The status quo is wrong because the status quo says you have to be self-sacrificial or you have to focus on other people. That's why others becomes one of the most dangerous words. All you have to do is just look at things factually and be able to evaluate them factually. That's why I have another statement there that I say, do unto others as you do unto yourself. Not do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but as you would do unto yourself. Unless if you have real major psychological issues, you're never going to hurt yourself. You're going to do as good as you can for yourself. Well, treat other people the way you treat yourself. But in order to do that, you need to be able to know what yourself is, how you feel, how you think. That's why, as much as I try to be in a certain formula type, as I said, include others and all that, but for you to be able to engage others, to include others, and to bring them into what you're doing as a leader, you also have to be able to have empathy and perspective taking. You have to be able to follow theory of mind. You have to understand that it's not only your thoughts that matter. You're not the only one with thoughts. Other people see things in a different way too, and you have to be able to understand them. And in order for you to understand them, you have to be able to understand that those people have feelings as well. That's why empathy and perspective taking are very important, because it gives you a different perspective of what these people are looking at. So you can make the bridge and you can make the connection as to how to bring them in, how to include them, and how to guide them. But if you don't have self-empathy, and if you can't understand your own thoughts, if you can't understand what you're dealing with, and if you're continuously relying on your emotions, then you won't be able to understand other people, or you might understand them in the wrong way.
I think what I take from that, Dr. Vahe, is that the first and very critical, it's not the first, I think it's the most critical level of emotional intelligence is self-awareness of your own emotions and your own emotional triggers, and then to seek to understand the emotion of others and empathy with those emotions. I liked what you said. You had a nice twist there on the golden rule about treating others the way you want to be treated, but you treat others the way you would treat oneself, which is really quite interesting. I'll share with you a conversation I had just earlier today, in fact, and we're talking about Simon again. We're talking about the statement that Simon says that is, be the leader that you wish you always had. So there was a little twist on that this morning where someone said to me, if you were the follower and you were the leader, would you follow yourself? And it was about that element of self-relativity, of understanding, well, who am I as a leader? And if I was the follower, am I the kind of leader that I would follow? So it was very, very, very interesting.
I think, I'm sorry to cut in, but I think while we're focused on leadership, we also have to focus on being a follower. If you want to become a good leader, you have to also learn how to become a follower. You can't just sit there and expect that leader to change your life, which a lot of these leadership, unfortunately, formats are promoting that. The focus is on what can you do for others, and that's not necessarily correct. Others have to learn to also follow as the leaders moving forward in whatever they have more capacity.
Excellent, Dr. Vahe. I knew this conversation was going to be very thought-provoking, and I really like what you're bringing to the table, and I think that our audience is going to get a lot out of this.
If I may add, and I'm sorry to cut you off a little bit, but I think it's important to say this. For example, on LinkedIn or many of these other leadership formats, continuously, if you realize, the images that all the followers have to do is just sit back and await for the leaders to change their life. And if a leader is not changing the follower's life and is not making them feel good, that's not a good leader. That's not the case. The follower has to take just as much responsibility in changing not only their life, but seek improvement and change through the leader. The role of the leader here is basically, what's the role of the leader? The role of the leader is not to be a savior of the follower. The role of the leader is to be a catalyst to teach the follower what they know so that the follower can learn that in the quickest and most efficient way rather than having to find it out on their own. That's what leadership and follower is. Your father tells you, don't touch that stove because it's going to burn your hand. That's leadership. You don't need to go and burn your hand in order to learn it. But by the same token, you can't just sit there and expect everything to be given to you. And if others aren't sacrificing themselves for you, then they're not good leaders. Unfortunately, we're getting a lot of that lately. And it's taking personal responsibility and self-sufficiency away. That's why there's a lot of blame shifting and self-victimization going on, which is not constructive for the person.
That's an interesting observation. I think you're onto something there, Dr. Vahe. And I would again bounce off that and say that a great leader is someone that inspires other leaders, inspires people to lead themselves and to take accountability and responsibility for their own actions and to develop a group of other leaders as well.
So what does that mean? That means that the leader is centered self and the followers are centered self, and they live from the inside out and they connect to each other that way. The leader is not externally focused, just giving everything to the followers. It's the same thing in any relationship, interpersonal relationship, a marriage, everything else. It's the same philosophy. That's why once you learn this technique, you can apply it to every aspect of your life. And emotional intelligence, when you discussed it, emotional intelligence, the way that I describe it, is to become aware of and to understand your own emotions and that of others. Because remember, we are very much in touch with our feelings. And the cognitive cognition technique, which I teach, is you learn to recognize your feelings and then find out what the underlying thought is. It's very difficult to access thoughts without feelings. So feelings are important. And that's where emotional intelligence comes in. Emotional intelligence teaches you to recognize the underlying thoughts, whether it's yours or others. And once you practice that, you become so quick and it becomes so instinctive where you become like you're walking around like a mindful person without needing any meditation or anything. Hence the reason why we go to the epigraph of the book, which says a quick and clever thinking system for self-improvement. You literally become very quick and clever.
That's a great reflection, Dr. Vahe, and it makes me think about the direction that I believe that modern coaching is going, and that is about taking people through a process where they go through self-discovery and self-learning and the ability to be a self-learning entity. So to be self-aware and to be always looking to see what you can do yourself. So rather than giving the answers, and we mentioned before about things like therapy, looking for solutions, like things like consulting, which is more like giving advice or giving answers. And teaching is imparting knowledge and skills, whereas coaching is about a process of self-discovery and a process of becoming a self-learner, a self-propelled self-learner. I think that's at the heart of some of the things that you're saying here in the role of the leader, to be self-aware first and then show others the way.
You're the only person that's with you 24/7. Therefore, you should be your own best therapist and you should be your own best coach. Sometimes you might not know how to initiate it, which is where my system comes in. But once you learn my system, you're going to be able to teach that to other people. Unlike any other personal development system, you don't need to continuously hear it from the teacher. You can teach it to other people and you can duplicate that. And that's the most important thing, where you become self-reliant and you begin to focus on yourself and you can find the answers. But as I said, there are two things that you need. You need to have the desire and you need to be able to have the ability to introspect. And that's going to take some time and it's going to be emotionally very difficult. Once you do that, and once you alleviate a lot of your negativities, then you raise yourself up to the neutral zone of contentment. Once you're content, anytime a new negativity arises, instead of you running away from it, covering it up by doing something positive or thinking something positive, you'll just nip that negativity in the bud and you won't let them accumulate. You'll continuously maintain yourself in the zone of contentment. And once you're content, then you can reach positivity and happiness very quickly because you're not sinking into negativity again.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vahe, and thank you on behalf of all of our audience. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation. I want to bring us towards a close now, and I always finish with two topics. For those that listen to the podcast, they know what's coming. There's one question that I ask all of my guests, which is, what's the one thing that you know now that you wish a 20-year-old Dr. Vahe knew way back when?
The most important thing that I've discovered, which I would like everyone to recognize, is how precious and how valuable life is and how important every single second of life is. I just put in 1.5 hours here because it was a reminder to me as to what life can be, how beautiful and colorful life can be, and how I would like other people to be able to do that and for them to be able to do that on their own. And then everyone else will just become an additive in their life. we have to take this literally. As I said, the mission statement in my book even says it more after, and some people might know it from LinkedIn. My father's passing last week. It's the mission statement is to live this improbably rare gift of life to its fullest possible potential. That should be one's motto. And it is not material things. Of course, many good things add to the value of life, but the primary thing is that if you're not content and fulfilled by yourself, you won't be able to live the quality of life that you want. And as I say in the book, wealth, fame, and power are byproducts of success. True successful life is how fulfilled you feel. And I wish I would have known this at any time, but I'm glad that I know it now. And I hope that other people can really begin to understand what this is. Then life becomes very beautiful. You value everything in life, even when a difficulty comes in, because you're going to look at that difficulty and you're going to laugh at it and say, you know what? I can find a solution for it.
Life is indeed a precious gift, and I hope that all of our audience are taking strides to make sure that you're making most of that gift that you're given and seeking fulfillment. And like Dr. Vahe said, fulfillment is not necessarily what fills your wallet or your bank account. It's about what fills you emotionally and makes you content. Thank you so much, Dr. Vahe. I love that reflection. The final one is I always give our guests the floor at the end of each show to give you the opportunity to talk to the audience about how people can get in contact with you. If they want to know more about the theory of self-relativity or to get in contact with you and have a conversation or seek your services, the floor is yours. You can use it however you see fit.
Thank you. I'm hoping that within a short period of time, we'll probably come out with the ebook first. I have a lot of demand for the book, but I just want to make sure that the book is properly organized because it's very, very comprehensive. And hopefully after that, it will be audio, and then we'll finally get to the print. But in the meantime, we have the website, which is selfrelativity.com, and they can find information there. I also, for the time being, do have dedicated some time as I have it in order to do one-on-one consulting with individuals who are interested. They can find the link on the website. And in the future, we'll be offering the coaching certification program, and then and we'll move forward from there for people to learn how to become coaches themselves and teach what I'm teaching to other people. And I'm also working on launching my own podcast and YouTube channels. We're in the process of that. So we have a lot of exciting things coming up, and I'm sure from the content of what you heard, there's no limit as to what can be discussed. So there should be a lot of exciting subjects to come up. And finally, whether it's on videos or whether it's in-person presentations, all my courses are going to be interactive, because I don't know who's there. I don't know what they're going to ask me, but if they ask me, they will realize anything and everything that's asked can be applied with the same system, can be answered with the same system. So the interactivity shows that how versatile this is, and not that it's anything that's been concocted in one way. It's basically based on facts, and facts don't lie, and facts are there. And once you learn to think that way, then you'll be able to address everything in the same way.
On behalf of all of us, Dr. Vahe, thank you so much for an enthralling conversation. I certainly took a lot away from it, and I know that our audience will as well. So please do take care and stay safe, and thank you once again. You've been listening to The Leadership Project. We really hope you enjoyed this episode with Dr. Vahe Ohanessian. Please do join us again soon as we bring you more great guests and more great content. In the meantime, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast service so that you're notified every time we upload a new episode. You can also find us on social media with a very strong presence on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and our new YouTube channel. In the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and always remember to challenge the status quo.